好testing 有冇聲 Okay, so this is the part 5 of our chapter 22 video. Okay, now just now when I was taking the part 4 of the video, suddenly it got so dark and I was wondering why. And then suddenly I remember today is actually a very strange phenomenon is happening right now. We are having a solar eclipse. 原來有偏食啊，我就話做乜咁黑嘅咧 Okay, so anyway, now that we had fun, now let's look at page 14 of our notes. Okay, now in which this video is going to be rather short because we are going to first talk about budget and leave the difficult part to the next video when we talk about the fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, now you see part 2 here, government expenditure. Remember the past 4 videos we talk about taxation as a revenue to the government, right? Now we are going to talk about expenditure, but then you are going to read it by yourself. I'm not going to waste your time. How the government is spending money on education, on public health, read it by yourself. Not going to waste your time here. Okay, now the more important thing is actually about budget. Okay, when we talk about budget in our syllabus, we are talking about the government spending, G, versus the taxation, government revenue. Okay, 好唔好啊? Now it goes like this. Now the story goes like this. Remember, every year 咁財爺會行出嚟有啲預算案㗎嘛，係咪啊? Now every year our government would predict, okay, they will have some prediction on how they are going to spend the money, how much money they're going to spend, how much money they're going to receive, and they will do a prediction, right? 係嘛? Now let's say every year 嗱，以前胡鬚曾嘅年代啦 okay, you remember every year the Hong Kong government will tell you this year we are going to lose money, right? 係嘛? Lose money 會有赤字啦。Now how do we call it? If we expect, if the government is predicting they are going to lose money, we call it a so-called deficit budget. Okay, now obviously, if they expect to get money, it would be a surplus budget. And then, if they expect it to be the same, that would be a balanced budget. Okay, remember, deficit means G is bigger than T. You're spending more than received, right? 好啦，咁啊，呢個容易啦，係咪啊? Not too difficult. But then, now naming. Now I know the naming sounds a little bit confusing. Now what happens after the year? We will know actually whether we have lost or not. If we actually loses money, we are spending more than we are receiving. We call it a budget deficit. Okay, 嗱，你見好混亂啊。The naming is very confusing, right? When you're predicting, we call it a deficit budget. When actually happen, we call it a budget deficit. And obviously, if we actually have more money, we call it a budget surplus, etc. Okay, 好嘛? So these are just some naming. Okay, 好嘛? Now once you understand this story, you don't need to spend time reading this box. Okay, you don't need to spend time reading this box. Okay, basically say the same. But the more important thing is actually about how the so-called budget, how the so-called deficit budget, the surplus budget is going to affect the macroeconomic performance. Okay, now first of all, remember when government spend money, basically we are saying the G increases. Now if you remember, G increases, most of the time it means AD would go up. Now therefore we call this effect an expansionary effect. When we talk about expansionary, we are talking about Y going up, the output level going up. Okay, now versus when taxation goes up, most of the time we are talking about AD going down. If you remember, 係嘛？冇咁多 disposable income 啊嘛，係嘛？ So it would be a contractionary effect, meaning Y would go down. So naturally, what you would be thinking is that, what about balanced budget? When G equals to T, naturally, you would be thinking about it should be the same, no effects, right? Now, unfortunately, things are not that easy. Now, in fact, let's start with the answer first. You need to remember, in the real world, the expansionary effect of G is actually bigger than the contractionary effect of taxation. Why, you ask? For one good reason. Now here, let's take a look. Now, let's imagine there are two things we can do. First, the government decided to spend $100 on the economy, right? Since, remember, AD is the CIGNX. If the government wants to spend 100, they can directly spend 100, right? Now, what it means is that, now,唔係咁啱嘅. The wordings is not exactly too correct, but it's easy for explanation. You can imagine AD would directly go up by 100, meaning Y would go up by 100, something like that. 係嘛? Now, this is on one hand. What about on another hand? Let's say I want to achieve also the expansionary effect. I can do this. Taxation, I can drop by 100. So in theory, you would have $100 more. But in reality, usually money would be divided into two parts. First part would be disposable income, right? When we have more disposable income, AD would be affected, right? 係咪啊? Now, unfortunately, remember, in reality, we will not spend all our money. So part of the money, what happens? Part of the money would actually become saving. When it becomes saving, there is no effect on AD whatsoever. Now, so do you get my point here? You see, yes, AD will still increase because YD will still increase. But the point is, it would be less than 100. Less than 100. By this story, you would know one of them would be increased by 100. Another would be less than 100. This is exactly the reason why the expansionary effect of government spending is actually bigger than the effect of taxation. Okay? Because part of the money will not be used as a disposable income. 好唔好啊? All right, now, with that in mind, now you should know. When we talk about balanced budget, even though the number is the same, since this effect is stronger, then it is actually expansionary in nature. What about deficit budget? When government spending is more than taxation. Now, the number is bigger, and then this guy, the effect is stronger, right? 佢 number 又大啲 ，effect 又勁啲，咁咪 expansionary 咯。Now, the trouble one is actually surplus budget. Even though we know G is smaller than T, but then there are three possibilities. Okay? It really depends. It really depends. Now, let's say, now, here, remember, I say part of it becomes disposable income, right? Now, some time ago, some economists has done a research back in 1988, I think, 我都未出世啊，係咪啊？佢發覺2088年發生咩事啦 ？The average YD out of 100 would be 40. So now let's assume 100 becomes 40. Okay, so there would be 3 possible cases. Let's say, okay, let's say G and T. Okay, let's say G. Sorry, T is here, right? Let's say the G is 100. No, 90 actually. T is 100. Okay, but then remember T translate into 40 only. In this case, we will have an expansionary effect. What about G being 40, this 100? Then it would be no effect since it's 40 versus 40. What about this? If this is 30, this is 100. 100 translate into 40. Still, it would be yes, a contractionary. So this one, we actually do not know. Therefore, budget, remember, you need to remember the effects. Now, this sentence is the most important. The effects of government expenditure is actually stronger than the effect on taxation. Now, therefore, let's look at one example and then we will move on to the next video. Okay, one example. Now, let's go to page 16. Page 16 of your notes. Let's look at 2016. This question. Now, this question, let me remind you, is a deleted question, but not because the answer is wrong, but only because EAA being very stupid, they mess up the answer. Okay? Now, if the government simultaneously increase expenditure, meaning the increase in G equals to the increase in T, taxable income tax, by the same amount. Now remember, we just mentioned this effect being stronger than this effect, right? So by just looking at this, the effect on aggregate output should be expansionary, right? Now this is correct, expansionary. Now unfortunately for that year, the answer is actually D. What happened? You need to remember when we talk about income tax, what happens? Now you increase income tax, it may lead to something we call disincentive effect. 係嘛？原來會出現 disincentive effect. Now, therefore, our SRAS or LRAS, okay, SRAS or LRAS may go down, meaning Y would be reduced. Here, this is what we call a contractionary effect. So we have contractionary, we have expansionary. What is the answer? The answer should be indeterminate. 其實我哋決定唔到啊，因為有升有跌啦。Okay, 好嘛？ So this one example, okay, like I always say in my lessons, this is the landmark question because after this question, after 2016, EAA become very careful when they talk about taxation. They need to clarify whether a taxation being income tax or some indirect tax because of this incentive effect. All right, so I promise you I keep this video short because all the other things will be left for the final video when we talk about fiscal and monetary policy, which, dare I say, would be a very, very difficult topic. All right, so brace yourself for a very long video for the next and final video on chapter 22. All right, see you again in the next long and important video. Bye bye.